All right, welcome back, everybody, to Black Ball Podcast. God, I feel like I can hear myself say that in the recording in the future. Yeah. Like I say it the same way every time. Today we got Celeste Noche.
Hello. Hi.
Celeste is a photographer. She lives in Portland now. She hasn't lived here her whole life, but that doesn't matter. We're accepting of all people.
Well, that's actually why I invited her on, was because she's got an outside perspective, and I thought it was really interesting. You wrote an article, what is it, the RACC?
RAC, yeah.
Yeah, for the RACC.
Oh, Regional
Arts and Culture Council.
Council, not coalition. Sorry.
I think that's what it is. They gave me a grant, so hopefully that's correct.
Yes, that's funny. I was actually looking to them about the same thing.
You should. They're great.
Cool. All right.
Anyways, you wrote an article for them that was about basically how your experience in Portland wasn't exactly what you expected based on what you heard. In terms of how progressive it is and how easy it is for artists of color to move up. Is that right?
That's it in a gist.
Yeah, okay. And then that was one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on was because you touched on a lot of things really briefly in the article, because I'm sure it was only supposed to be so long. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to go in depth on a little bit more of that. So can you summarize that article for us again? Sure.
The piece is called Portland Falls Short When Supporting Artists of Color. And it's really about... it touches on Portland's, it's known as a progressive city, and for, voting purposes, sure, it is. But when it comes to actually supporting artists in terms of promoting artists from marginalized backgrounds, from literally giving money and monetary support, showing up to their events, it doesn't seem like that reflexive of their progressive values. So it was really about how when I moved here, everyone's so nice, but I didn't feel like it was really hard to find a community that would, not that I was looking for a mentor per se, but it felt hard to break into the industry. It felt hard to find someone who was willing to share resources. And it wasn't until 2 years into being here that I found a community of color that I felt more supported and encouraged to do collaborations and more important work.
Well, it didn't sound like you were specifically looking for a community of color right off the bat, correct?
No, I was Portland is known as a creative place, and maybe this is just the hearsay I have coming from San Francisco, but there's the whole keep Portland weird, and it's small and quirky and progressive, and so it seems like the ideal place for an artist to get started or to sort of jump into the industry. But when I moved here and I just would reach out to photographers, any creative people, it was just, everyone was nice surface level, but there was no engagement. There was no, I don't know, there wasn't that community that I was hoping for, but maybe it was not fair for me to assume that it would be here.
Was that just with photography people that you were reaching out to?
Yeah, because that's where, that's what I was looking into. And I also didn't know where to start in terms of other fields, who to even reach out for things like that. So,
yeah. I'm gonna maybe talk shit on photographers right now.
Sure.
I think, because we were talking about this before when we were doing the photos, how we look on the F-Stopper site.
Yeah.
And it's the most hate-driven comments. And I think that, I don't know what it is. I think photographers can be assholes.
Photographers are the guitarists of
totally
visual art community.
They're really they're really self-absorbed. This is me and my work. Do you see this? I feel like I see this.
I think it depends. So I don't go onto F-Stoppers. Maybe I read some articles, but I'm not engaged with it. Maybe for that same reason. But the communities of photographers that I'm now more engaged with are women photographers of color, and those have all been super supportive. But outside of that, and because the industry is heavily male dominated, heavily white dominated, what we see is that weird toxicity and macho-ness where they don't want to share resources. They are I guess the guitarists of the industry. I don't know. There's this weird they don't want to share resources. They will only help out their bros. It's just a weird industry to be part of.
Yeah, and it's very gear driven, so everyone's trying to show off their gear.
Yeah. Yes.
And
at what point or why?
Yeah, that seems a little silly because gear's one thing, but it doesn't matter if you don't know what you're doing, right?
Yeah, but it's toys, man. It's adult toys.
Yeah.
expensive
Not
adult
those kind of
toys.
toys. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it is. Yeah. We're not going there. No, but it is. It's like gadgets that people like to play with, and it just I don't know. It can look really cool and flashy, but at the end of the day, I mean, they just might have fun with the process. I mean, sometimes when I see these like super old school photographers who might not have the technical skill, but they have all this gear, and it might look like nice lighting, but it's not very creative lighting. That's a trap. They just get stuck in like technical everything. Look at the catch light, like, and it's like, I don't know.
There's like more of a focus on the equipment that they're shooting with versus the effort and the personality or the art vision that's behind it. And it, for a while, at least when I was just trying to find any kind of community in photography, it felt like a keeping up with the Joneses situation where they're like, oh, you only have this camera, like you really need to get this. And to an extent, you know, certain equipment will help you create a specific mood or whatever you're looking for, but it shouldn't be the end all be all for like your work.
I black out the name of my camera and then model just because I don't care what people think.
Nice.
Well, yeah, that's smart. I think that's a smart thing to do.
I've heard people do that so they don't get
Stolen.
targeted.
Yeah, you don't get
That's
targeted.
that's another good idea.
But yeah, I just don't. I guess that's beside the point.
Yeah,
And it's always there. These big white letters.
I know. Some branding.
Yeah, that's what they're trying to do. Yeah, but I mean, I think like some other industries, and we've kind of seen this in the street art industry, how they're really supportive.
Yeah, I think
least-
it
then
takes
again-
a
Yeah.
while to find your people.
Yeah.
For sure. I think the street art community they need to support each other or else it won't exist. That's a little bit harder.
But there's really
Yeah.
accepting of just bringing new people in.
Yeah,
And
for
when
sure.
When I like being a photographer, when I see the photography industry and then I see the street art industry, I'm like, man,
yeah.
they seem so kind and loving in the street art world.
Yeah, I think they're just totally different industries though too, because you know in street art there's something subversive, there's something underground about that, and where you know photography has such a range. There's like commercial work where people are getting hundreds or hundreds of thousands of dollars for a shoot, and so they don't have potentially that same adversity to work. Like they don't have the same resources, and you know street photography or like marginalized communities, there's just something where they recognize that they don't have the same access, equity, privilege, and resources as some places, and so they are more open communities because they know how hard it is to be isolated.
For sure. I noticed, what was the name of that magazine that you recently submitted your photos to or let them use really for free?
Well, it's more complicated than that, but
Then tell
it's fine.
us. Yeah.
It's just I think they're Spain-based. They're a small like independent publication called Pulpetas, which means meatballs. But they're like an art magazine, and one of my friends who's an illustrator, Wendy McNaughton, was being profiled, and they asked for photos of her, and I had just taken some, so she referred me. And when I asked them if they had budget for compensation, they said they didn't because they're a small publication, but that they wanted some photos to accompany her interview. And so I thought, it's for my friend Wendy, sure, I'll just send a couple. And so I sent a selection from them to choose from. And several months later, I got the magazine, and the spread is like 12 pages, like full pages. And I mean, there's the due diligence of me as an artist to ask more questions about, you know, how many of the images are you using? But it was kind of disheartening to see how much they had used and how important the photos were to the story. And then for them to say there was no budget for it. And then when I asked them about it, actually, I didn't ask them about it. I just feel like it's, with social media, we see a lot of people's A-sides and like what they're like, oh, I got published in this magazine. But I wanted to share that like I also had a negative experience where actually I elected to share these pro bono, and actually I'm really disappointed in myself for not being more thorough in who I was sharing this work with, because they shared so much of it without, I don't know, to them. Well, basically I posted about it. They wrote back to me a very long letter telling me it wasn't fair of me to complain about them on the internet, and that it would have been more fair if I had written to them privately, which
You did.
I wrote to them, and I think that if this is the experience of some of your contributors, then you need to be transparent about like those relationships and also how you're compensating them or not compensating them. And, their point was that they only compensated for work that was exclusively made for them. And so because these photos pre-existed, that's why it was okay for them not to pay me.
Which is ridiculous.
Yeah. Because if you look at the spreads, the feature is presented in the same feature length as other profiles, which I don't know which work has been previously done or not. And just my criticism is that people use the excuse of a small business or a small publication all the time for reasons not to pay someone. But if your company can benefit from someone's content, you can also afford to pay them.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see how many ads they packed in that magazine also.
Well, they actually are ad lists, so that was one thing that they were talking about. It's like, as you can see, we don't have any ads, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. More power to your vision, but you also should still pay for all the content that's
How are they
in
funding it, the magazine?
Maybe sales, I don't know, but probably they're like a biannual. They're very small, like the fine art magazines. And this isn't just to put the spotlight on them specifically. I think that this problem of undercompensation for especially for artists and especially with the excuse of small publications is like rampant. So it's not just them.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring this up because it touches on the idea of doing free work. And I don't know if you still think this, but you posted that like free work is never worth it. I think it's worth it sometimes, but I think you gotta, as someone who's done a lot of free work and been an artist most of his life, I feel like if you like the work, then it's worth it. Like if you're like, I'm enjoying doing, I know what this is free for, and I like doing this for free for these people, then it's worth it.
Yeah.
But it's when they pull out the exposure word, I'm like, no.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think anyone's ever done that to me, to be honest.
Dude,
not that I've agreed to. I think people have pulled that word out on me, and I've said no. But I don't think I've ever agreed. If they say that, that's like a red flag.
It's so slimy. It's like, it's going to go in front of a huge audience. Like, no, dude, no.
Yeah.
Uber tried that once with me. I was like, Uber, you guys have like billions of dollars in funding.
Yeah.
You can't throw me a couple hundred to write the thing that you're asking me to do. There's just no excuse. So I understand, and I think that I think being able to choose the work that you do for free or that you volunteer or donate is one thing, but I do hope that at some point we'll stop normalizing uncompensated labor.
Yeah, for sure.
At some point.
Again, I think people feel pressure to do it, and they shouldn't. Again, it should be something you enjoy.
And also, like, you shouldn't, if you're a company and you're doing the stuff that they did to you and complaining about it, like, why? You can't complain if the artist that you're taking the work from goes out and says, like, oh, yeah, they didn't pay me and they used full page spreads of this. And it was like the backbone of their magazine, basically. They can't be surprised, and they should learn from their lessons, and they shouldn't complain to you.
They were defensive.
You posted their messages, and they weren't exactly like well written.
No, I do think it's a second language thing.
I was going to say that too, and I wonder if that had anything to do with the miscommunication in the first place. Maybe not.
Maybe, but at the end of the day, they still got free work and really took liberties with the amount of work that they republished.
And they didn't really help their case at all with their response to you. And I was like, because I kind of get the, like, don't put us on blast thing, but like, if they respond that way, then I'm just like, well, now I don't feel bad for you at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also think though too, if you are in a position where you didn't expect someone to have this experience, and like, if I was in their position and I got that message, I would feel apologetic, and I would want to try to do what I could to make it right in whatever way was possible.
Totally.
But to be immediately defensive and immediately dismissive
and accusatory almost.
It's not cool.
It's bad PR.
Bad PR.
Yeah. You can just tell, because there's people who do that, who respond to those kinds of, like, there's people who get called out and then they respond by just being very open and factual about what happened. Like, oh, okay, I see why you're upset. Hey, this is exactly what happened. We feel this is fair. That's like a more appropriate way to do it, if you're standing by what you did. Or if you don't feel that way, then apologize. I think that's it's pretty simple way to go about things.
Yeah.
Give them the money.
Anyways, going back to, or give you the money. That would have been pretty sweet.
That would be nice too.
But going back to the article, so you said that you were going to events and noticing you were the only person of color there.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty heavily or did you mean like for a specific event?
No, I was actually going to ask you if you had specific events that you thought were shocking that you were the only person of color there.
I mean, it took me a while coming to Portland, and I didn't even realize I was like usually the only brown person in the room until a little while in. My sister came to visit, and she was like, "Why are we the only brown people here?" And I was like, "Oh, you're right. This feels weird."
Well, there's a lot of white people in general too.
Yeah, it's like 70% or something pretty
is
high.
It only that? I feel like it was higher.
Maybe 70.
I don't even.
Maybe
I was
79.
looking at it the other day. It was
Might be 79.
about 70. Yeah,
70,
Okay.
70 to 80. I don't remember.
the 70s somewhere.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's just, let's see, specific events. I mean, I do a lot of wedding photography, and when I first came, one way I tried to get into the industry was like by helping with styled shoots and things, which I don't recommend anymore. But those were always like wedding photography in general is like very white dominated. So in those instances, it was just like I was usually the only person of color, and then I don't know, any art events. It's hard to name specific events because for most people of color, I think in Portland, when they go to arts-focused things, I mean, someone can maybe have a different experience, but it's really common to be one of a couple, like POC in a room.
What? Yeah, I'm really curious what the actual events you're going to.
Well, I would go to like book signings or like open houses or gallery shows or just things in town. I mean, I was new too, so the things that are publicized or have the budgets for publicity probably are not the most diverse things in general.
Yeah.
So a lot of it could be like access to those things and just knowing about it. Now I intentionally go to shows and events that are geared toward like that highlight work by artists of color. But there was one thing that I wrote about specifically in the article was there's a local, I think, arts organization called Disjecta, and they had a whole culinaria series that was supposed to pair art and food. But they had an event that was Zen themed, or Asian themed or something, and both artists, neither of them was Asian, but the tickets were $140 or something. And so this was just to me like an example of, how there can be organization or like they're trying to highlight like a diverse subject, except they're not including people from that background. And RAC, who funded this essay because they wanted to hear about like the state of the arts in Portland, they're actually a funder for Disjecta. And so that's my criticism that like RAC can, in some ways want these like conversations to happen, but monetarily that's like what their money's going towards. And I can go on. Sorry.
This is good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we invited you on, was to talk about this.
But yeah, when we reached out to the community, reached out to the organizers of the event, their comments were deleted and they were blocked from the event. And when further conversation happened, after long threads, the person in charge responded, well, we had 10% POC at the event, as if that was enough. 10%. I'm sorry, I just
so that's
like
underrepresentative of the actual population.
Yeah.
How'd they actually even keep track of that?
About who came?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the event was small enough. If they're like $140 tickets, I don't know how many people.
$140 tickets?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
So like that's the other thing. Like you take something that's borrowed from someone else's culture. You don't give the spotlight or the platform to people from that culture, and then you sell tickets at a rate that is inaccessible to the majority of like people. Like it's just not. It's not accessible or equitable.
Oh.
That whole event sounds like...
That sounds awful.
It does, but it honestly, and it just sounds like Portland in a nutshell, kind of.
Exactly.
A lot of the...
But then let's look at like Bryce Wong shows.
Like aren't those self-funded? Kind of like he raises the money himself?
Yeah, like they're like...
But is that the same? Because I don't know, that seems different to me. Sorry, I'm cutting you off.
I mean, it's an art show.
Yeah.
I don't know who he is.
Bryce Wong is a Asian American artist.
He was on our show a while back,
Yeah.
and he's a big artist in Portland.
Yeah,
he
he's well known.
He puts on these like wild art shows, and I feel like that's the exact opposite of what you're describing.
But he's putting them on.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
they're
saying.
self-funded.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
So I guess
Yeah.
like if RAC is putting on or some other...
Well, it was RAC and someone else too, another big arts funder in the city. And I'm not saying that like this is the all-encompassing experience of Portland. But when you think of where funds are going primarily, like like the artist you just talked about, if he's self-funding something, that's different than public institutions with plentiful resources giving money to artists.
Is it weird that I didn't even
community.
know that these organizations put on art shows? Like, I usually only go to artists put on shows.
I mean, it's just, I think it depends on the social circles you're in. I only knew about it when my community was, like, people that I'm friends with on Facebook were criticizing it. So that's how I found out.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I wasn't, like, on their email list. But I think that's the thing, too. Portland feels small, but it's even more, small in its own pockets.
It's exclusive.
Yeah.
People can have a tendency to be really weirdly exclusive here.
I think that was the main thing of how I felt when I first came here. That there wasn't like, I don't know, everyone was nice, but no one wanted to let you into their circles.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I've always felt like that's been the case here. Is it different in San Francisco?
I honestly, when I left, it was such a weird time for me because I was leaving my job at this tech company. And I had been trying to reach out to people there, but it's really hard to say because I was still like I was younger then, but I felt like people were more open to sharing some things. It's just because it's a bigger city and it's a little bit more fast paced, like maybe on a scale that San Francisco and Portland are similar-ish in terms of how often people would respond to things. But because I knew Portland to be like smaller and tighter community, I expected differently from Portland. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's smaller. The tight community thing seems to me like not
false.
true.
Yeah,
it's like it's
I
never
think it
been.
depends.
Yeah, it's never been that way. I've made connections only in the most traditional ways. Like I had a class with someone, or like I had to do something with someone. I was forced to collaborate with someone, or be in an intimate situation with someone, and that's how we work together. I mean, Alex and I went to school together forever, and so did Nick and I, and like now we're working together, and we're only like, how many people do you work with you didn't go to school with at this close of a level?
Well, this is unique. Like us doing a podcast. Like my other jobs, like I don't
No, I know, but those are your
people at all.
jobs though. You applied for them and got hired. Like, but I mean, like outside of your actual like your actual real job, it's like all people you went to school with or met through school, right? Somehow,
Kinda? I don't know. Kinda.
at least like that you work with on a regular basis. I don't know. That's what it seems to be like. Like people they work together. They do something intimate together, like not intimate. Like
Well, I guess you kind of have to like work with someone before you commit to work with them more. Like it's not that fun just to go completely random.
yeah,
Like I met Luke in college.
yeah,
I
in
met
school.
yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and you want to work with the people that you know and you trust and whose work that you like. But I think that sometimes, for people in positions of like being able to hire other people, sometimes that can be limiting because if you're limiting your hiring abilities to your circle, like think of how many people are outside those circles as well, who talent you don't even know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that is a tough call. I feel like because sometimes I don't know. You just gotta you can only invest so much time and energy, and you don't want to if you can pick from like anyone, you don't want to make the wrong choice.
Yeah,
I think it's just a convenient thing to look within your circle.
totally.
Yeah. Pass judgment on it that way.
Yeah. I mean, for sure.
It's not right that's how
It
you
is
do
convenient.
it. It's
You
just
know
convenient.
someone.
Yeah, but sometimes it's like I think when you're doing art stuff, it's a little bit. You kind of want to work with who you know if you can, because you know that the project's gonna go okay, probably. Because I mean, have you had experiences working with people that you didn't know that well, and then they turned out one way or the other, like they turned out poorly or good?
Man, I think it goes both ways, and even some experiences in working with people that I do know, it's been not good.
That's true.
Yeah,
Like,
even
I've
with friends.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh,
I
you can
worked
go
with
Yeah,
friends
yeah,
where I was
yeah.
like, "What the fuck was that?" Like that was awful.
Yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
you can go both, but I've had it go both ways too. You just, I don't know. I think I would encourage anyone who has the ability to collaborate with more people, even if it's like for small projects, to just branch out a little bit more because I think that helps, like diversify things a bit more.
Definitely.
And you said, you brought up in the article that once you found communities of color, they were more accepting.
Yeah, the difference was really striking because, when I first came here, I would, I think I would go into shops and just talk to owners for a while, and everyone was really open to like doing shoots together, but they're always pro bono, or they're always, something that wasn't super fair. But when I found this community, they were so insistent on like reminding me that I should be getting paid for my work. They would share their resources, their contacts in ways that other people wouldn't. I don't know, the level of support and the like willingness to share those resources was like the biggest difference to me.
So did they share your resources with you just from you talking to them, or did you work with them, or did they actually see your work, or were they like, at what stage? Sorry, I'm not asking this very well. Did they see your work and then be like, oh, she's legit? Or did they just talk to you? Yeah.
You mean the people who like shared the honestly, most of this was all done through like a Facebook group.
Yeah, but they can still see your work on the internet.
Yeah, I think so, but I don't know that anyone takes the time to like click through to something. Like if someone asks me, hey, do you know anyone at this organization as a contact? I don't click through their profile to make sure they're like, I don't know, like to look for something. I have this information and I'm happy to share it with you because I feel like if you're part of this community, then it'll benefit you. But that's just the experience that I've had. There hasn't been a reason to be like protective of that stuff because I think we all benefit from sharing resources.
Yeah.
How big is that Facebook community?
When I joined, it was maybe like 200 or 300, but now it's like a couple thousand. 2,000-3,000.
Damn.
Yeah.
And it's all in Portland? It's all people who live in Portland? Mm-hmm. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But I think people come here. A lot of it is people who've come here and who have felt really isolated.
Right.
And so they look for that community, and that's probably why it's been so effective.
Right. So, people have been moving here in droves, as we always talk about, and anyone who lives here knows. Mm-hmm. Where do you think that the reputation of Portland being so progressive comes from? Because it's not like, for sure, historically, it's
not.
Well, not just not, particularly with race.
Yeah.
It's not progressive at all.
No.
So how does the word get out there that it is? Or how does that idea get out there, I wonder?
I genuinely don't know.
Yeah, because it's not just people from California who hear that. It seems like the entire country.
It had to just been attitude. That had to have been it.
What do you mean?
Like, what's the waterfront park guy's name? John McCall. What's the old
Tom McCall?
Tom McCall, the old governor. Do you see videos of him back in the day? And he's an interesting guy. But it's kind of funny. I don't know. I think like that attitude of him like back in the day.
What was his attitude?
Where he would actually like straight up talk about like Californians and stuff. People would say the Californians would come up and they would like go in the city, like, yeah, I feel like they just kind of want to take our money. And he's like, yeah, bring them up. And shit, he would just do shit like that. It was like a weird attitude that he had back in like the 40s.
Well, how does it relate to race?
I don't know. He was just like a different kind of person. I'm saying it doesn't have anything to do with race.
Oh, okay.
It was just attitude. It's weird attitudes.
I mean, when I think of like Austin, they just have like a reputation of being more progressive, and and they're in like Texas, and so I don't know if it's on the same level as like over time you just hear more and more, and then hearsay becomes maybe fact. It's based off of the way Oregon votes, I think generally is more progressive, but in terms of race, it's a whole other.
That's true.
Yeah, the race is like, it's straight up not true.
Voting is such a weird way to look at stuff, though, because you have like two choices.
Yeah,
so it's not, or it doesn't speak a lot to your actual beliefs or personality, does it? When you're like
these
forced
are my only
to
two
pick.
options.
Yeah, it's like I can be a horrible racist piece of shit, or I cannot. It doesn't mean that you aren't a little bit discriminate on some level or something. You know what I mean? Because I feel like there's always been people who are like at different levels of discriminate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's always been something that, because everyone's different. So it's hard to, it sucks when you're forced to make assumptions based on reducing people's opinions to either A or B.
Yeah.
Basically.
Do you think it could also be, and we talk about this too, like how like the punk rock scene used to also be huge downtown and now it's not?
Yeah, it's pretty much dead.
It's
and metal.
Yeah, but like,
Metal,
do you
yeah.
think that kind of played into the not racial progressiveness?
What do you mean? You think that scene?
Maybe just like a more immersive music scene that was in town that now it's not.
I don't know.
For back in the day.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that maybe was significant, like kind of showed that we may be progressing somewhat, but then it died out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, it's tough.
I mean, there's pretty progressive and prevalent like underground music, like DJing and.
Is DJing progressive though?
Well, not DJing itself, but I mean like the communities that are DJ'd like for. I think I don't know enough about DJing to like speak to that. But
I feel like music usually is kind of a progressive thing.
It can be. But it's like the scenes here build up and die out so fast. Remember Dubstep Tuesdays?
Yeah.
Like that was
Whiskey Wednesdays.
huge.
Yeah, dubstep. Yeah.
It was huge, and then it's just completely gone. Like
Completely
they went
gone.
out of business.
Yeah.
Like what? How? Like
Yeah.
that? It just changes so fast. And not only that, but like I was just reading this article. I saw this article I think today title that was like how do we deal with living with the music of problematic artists? And I'm like, aren't like most famous musicians problematic? Like isn't like.
Were they like referring to Tekashi and shit? Like,
I have no idea. I think they were referring to more famous people than Tekashi, but I didn't actually
or
look.
like that scene.
I don't think it was just that scene. I'm sure they were talking about like pop and
Pop, like Taylor Swift. Is she a problematic artist?
people
Oh,
complain
yes,
about.
she's
People complain.
awful.
Yeah, Taylor Swift.
But like
I don't-
Tekashi's like shooting people and like robbing people and stuff.
a lot of people do. A lot of artists do that though. Is what I'm
I
saying.
mean, Taylor Swift is like the embodiment of white feminism. So she's.
House, can you enlighten us on that? Because we don't read on
fill us in.
Taylor Swift.
Sure.
I
I
don't think.
mean, she has a huge platform. She has endless influence and reach, and yet wouldn't speak up about during the election or anything. She wouldn't use her influence. Like she just wouldn't talk about it. And
Wait.
She advocates for. I mean, she's all about like girl power and stuff, but like only to the extent that it's comfortable for her.
Do you think it's okay for all? I mean, like I can't rag on people for not going into politics.
I agree because
Yeah.
it's not really a musician's job to go into politics, especially if they don't. I don't think people who aren't experts in a subject should be preaching to their. You know what I mean?
I think it's everyone's decision, but I also feel like there's just I don't know. I think that there's a social responsibility to talk about the issues that are important to you, and her silence was super deafening.
I guess I'd have to know more details because I just don't think I don't know. To me, it's like I don't look to white people to tell me about race, or I don't want to listen to them about race usually. Because to me, it's
Sure.
like, what do you know?
Yeah,
That's just my kind of, I don't know. That's my reaction to them is usually, I'm like, I don't, it usually bothers me to hear non-colored people talk about that stuff because I just don't feel like, it doesn't seem insightful to me, I guess, as a white guy. Does that make any sense? I don't know. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
I understand what you mean. And I'm not saying that like you should limit the resources and the information you're getting from one specific source, but I think that with the influence that she has as a person and in this world that and the fact that like she caters to specifically like the middle of America where she has huge influence on places that like more progressive areas can't reach. Like, I don't understand like why you wouldn't.
What was she
personally.
being silent about? Do you know? Do you remember?
I mean, I don't have it on me right now. I can send it to you later.
Okay.
But you should look up Twitter comments about Taylor Swift.
For sure. I mean, Twitter will hate on anyone for anything, ultimately. But yeah, but I do know people love to hate on Taylor Swift. I just don't know the details.
I get annoyed actually the more I think of it, like when celebrities try to sway stuff.
I agree.
know.
Yeah, I don't know because I just they're
not experts. They don't
Exactly,
know.
they're not experts. Like I don't know. I don't see.
I guess I just don't think that you need to be an expert to share like where you stand and whether you support something. Like I think that if you have like Beyonce is political, she regularly will advocate for different things and different issues.
She's probably more informed though. I would just assume that. Again, I don't know this.
Sure.
But she seems like someone who's more informed than Taylor Swift on political issues. That's
probably accurate.
Yeah. And so that makes more sense to me. Or like Emma Watson, is that her name? About gender issues. Because she goes on, is that her name? Hermione?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. She is crazy educated on gender stuff and also talking about it. And so her I like to listen to. Not only because is she a woman, but she just seems like she really knows what she's talking about. And when I listen to her talk, I'm like, oh yeah, this is like really intelligent, really well informed. I'm glad you're saying all this stuff. You seem to be improving the world. And it's not just because I agree with her position. It's because it seems like she spent so much more time digging into this, researching it, trying to get to an answer than I have. And so when I listen to her talk about it, I'm like, thank you for saying that. And I'm glad that you're spreading this message. But because I think it's important to because I think people do damage by going up uninformed and taking a position, and sometimes it's obvious, like, should I be racist or not? No, like that. If it comes down to that, it's easy to make a decision, but most issues I don't think are that simple. And if they are, they don't need to be preached about. I don't know.
I guess I just think primarily of like the presidential election and how things were. It was such a weird space that time to be in, to know that, like, to me that was a really easy is subjective, but like a way that she has direct access to the majority of the people who were Trump supporters. And even just having, I don't know that much about her, obviously, but I just feel like there could have been more. And there's like this class of like white feminism that gets sorry, this is just going for a long time.
No, I think you're actually getting to a good point. Continue.
Oh, white feminism. I guess when we were talking about like race and progressiveness here in town, and I think that white feminism is one of the key examples of where Portland falls short. Even if you look at the people who showed up for a women's march, but then the people who show up for Black Lives Matter marches, like, that's a really clear example to me of white feminism and what progressiveness means in this town.
So it's kind of like white feminism versus intersectional feminism. Like, how can you be a feminist if you don't include intersectional feminism? Mm-hmm. I do think that is a good point, and I think people fall short of that all the time. That's actually kind of what I was getting to about when I was saying that, like, there's different levels of discrimination. Sure. And it's like, you don't have to be a blatant, like, you don't have to be a Klansman to be racist. Yeah. There's other ways. But yeah. I think it's a good point. I don't know if did Taylor Swift like miss the boat on something to do with the election?
I honestly I don't have the the exact thing to share with you. I just think it was most people talking about how she hasn't said anything, just being in that position and not saying anything about anything. Maybe do
you think that speaks to like culture as a whole? Like, we put these people on pedestals who who haven't necessarily earned it. Like, maybe she doesn't know anything about anything important at all. Yeah.
I mean, that's probably not wrong.
Well, then why? Then like, is it her? Is it how much is it her fault? Like, it seems like almost equal parts her fault or less her fault. I don't know. Than it is like America's fault for putting her on that pedestal, like just because she can sing and write songs. Yeah,
she's given a huge amount of privilege and influence. So
right.
Part of that's like, that itself is not just only imagined. I think there is something to what you're saying about, how people weigh what celebrities and things say, but that's why I feel like there's a responsibility in people in those positions to speak up.
But why do they even get to that position? Musicians are so huge. If you look at Instagram, like, because Instagram's probably the number one social media thing right now, maybe that and Twitter. I would assume.
Wow, Facebook's massive.
But it's slowing down. You think
I feel like there's still more people on Facebook than
the other two?
Yeah.
Probably than Instagram, yeah. But I feel like Twitter's way up there. I don't know. I don't use Twitter, so maybe that's a bad example. I barely go on. I don't really go on Facebook anymore, though, either. I pretty much only use Instagram. But what was I saying? Oh, yeah. I was looking at who the top people are on Instagram. So who has the most followers, which in turn is who has the most influence on Instagram, right?
Bieber. Is it Bieber?
Bieber's one of them. He's not like in the top 5, I don't think.
Oh,
he's
really?
in the top he's in the top 20. But he's a musician.
Who's number one?
Actually it's Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah.
Pretty sure.
I can see that.
He's a soccer player. So you have athletes and musicians, literally almost the entire like top 20, with maybe the exception of like one or two, like Vin Diesel somehow is up there. Like it's just athletes and musicians. So why are we giving them? I don't know. To me, it's interesting. It's like how do they have so much importance right now, and why? And yeah, I think it's interesting to think of that. Like, could we give them so much importance, but do they know? Like, do they really know the answers to all the world's problems or like serious issues?
Yeah, sure. I feel like we shouldn't be putting them on. I think we should do more our own research and reflect more on like what issues mean to us. But it's just hard. I think we also have to acknowledge that they have that influence and
Definitely
hope that they use it.
But
in a
because that
positive-
influence is why a celebrity became president. Because of that snowball, which is like, that's bullshit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he became president because of racism, but and maybe those are tied together.
But like he was like a celebrity.
yeah,
Yeah, like he was able to run for president at that capacity because he was already a celebrity.
Yeah, and like because he had that pull. I don't know. I mean, we can go deeper. I don't know. I mean, it's obviously not a good thing, but like, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Pedestals. Get them off the pedestal.
Yeah.
Get all these
Knock 'em
celebrities
down.
out. Get like real cool people up on the pedestal who actually know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I think it's important to like again like go outside of the circles that you're used to. Like why we should be looking into more voices that we don't hear from often, so that we aren't looking only on like these pedestals or on these very specific viewpoints for like thoughts about things. I feel like it's this homogeneity that just keeps perpetuating itself.
Yeah, that's a ridiculously good point, I think.
But yeah. One thing I know we were talking about like the degrees of racism,
Yeah.
but if you want to bring it back towards art a little bit,
Yeah. Let's do it.
I have
It's an art podcast.
I have a series called Portland in Color, and one of the people that I interviewed here, she just said sometimes it would be easier if Portland was just flat out racist because like the microaggressions that she experiences are like harder to deal with. Whereas if someone's like flat out aggressively racist to you, can just hopefully just like push them aside. But if someone is trying to convince you that they're right and they're on your side, but willfully ignorant to like the harm they're doing to you, then that's just like more annoying and more emotional labor to deal with.
Well, right. I mean, to me, it's always just seemed like, because we all grew up here, to me, it always felt like people were racist secretly. And that was what's the difference? Like, that's worse. You
Secret
know,
racism.
Yeah, no, I mean, for real, because like they wouldn't. It was like really under the radar. Like you don't like say that out loud.
Yeah.
Or you only say that in very private settings to people who you think aren't going to repeat it. Because that's literally happened to me multiple times from multiple people who people would be like only say that shit because it was a private setting, and it's like, oh, that's how you feel, but like they would never say that out loud because it's not socially acceptable.
Ooh.
Yeah. And that's I'm serious. Like that's happened to me a lot, and actually more towards Mexicans than any other race, which is really messed up. But I think that's because they're the most common race here, other than white people.
I don't know what the stats are.
Yeah. I think it's Asians, but I haven't heard as much racism towards Asians as I have towards other races. Personally, this is literally just my personal experience from people actually talking to me. So it's totally skewed. But like I just like for sure, like by the time I was a teenager, I realized like, oh, okay, people here aren't like totally accepting. They're just quiet about it, which I think that's worse.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
like a complicity.
Yeah, I think you make a good point, which is really why I wanted to have you on, because you were kind of exposing that in your article, and I've been thinking this for well over a decade, and it's been bugging the crap out of me because it's just, I hate people who put on such a different face than what they actually are. I understand putting on a face to some degree, that you have to in certain situations, for sure. You don't always have to speak your mind about everything all the time, but like faking stuff like that can be harmful, and I think it is damaging, you know, to pretend to be to pretend not to be racist if you are kind of racist, you know, because then you're not having a discussion, and the discussion is how we figure stuff out. And, you know, like you said, like branching out, I think that's really important. I think that's a really good point, that people need to get outside of their comfort circles. And I don't think people in Portland like to do that so much.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, often, I mean, I think when I came here and I would see like, I don't know, I just felt like the work, when I would look at publications, like a lot of the work was being shot by the same people. And again, it's like, you know someone, so you want to keep working with them. But I would ask, like, why aren't there more people of color, like photographers or artists or whatever? And I mean, I don't have like a specific example I can like speak to, but I feel like the answer was often like, there are no people of color here. Like, I don't know where to find them. And so I like created my photo series and now database Portland in Color as a response to that. And we launched on Sunday, but now we have...
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we just launched our website on Sunday, and we launched with 100 people, but as of today, we have like 150. So it's like already growing a lot.
That's awesome. So how does it work?
So Portland in Color, it started as a photo series by myself like a year ago. And I would just profile artists of color in town, take their portraits, ask them about their experiences, because I think a lot of people don't think about like the ad. Like, it's already hard being an artist. I think there's like there's like a lot of instability. There's all these things that happen, but it's sort of compounded, I think, like when you come from a marginalized background. So I just wanted to share more of that so people could see their work, but also hear about their experiences. But now, with my friend and now colleague, Emily Prado, we have launched a new website where there's like a whole database. So and it's separated by, or tagged by medium. So if you need like a photographer, video, ceramics, painting, illustration, whatever, and it's still growing, like you can hopefully use this as a tool so that if you need to look for someone in that field and you want to diversify the groups that you're working with, you can use this to look for those people.
How does someone make it on the database?
You literally submit a form and hopefully have the only thing we ask is that you have a public facing page that shows your work. But and I think that I'm just trying to keep it open so that people from all different backgrounds and mediums can be part of it. So you just go on to the website and it's pretty straightforward.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, other than that, is there anything else that you wanted to bring up or promote while we have you on here? We're about out of time.
Oh, not mainly Portland in Color. Hopefully, it's just intended to highlight the experiences and work of artists of color in town.
This is just portlandincolor.com or Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks.
And what's your Instagram again?
Oh, Extra Celestial.
Extra Celestial. Perfect.
That's cool.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having me.
It was a good, slightly different discussion than we usually have.
Yeah,
not just
it
going
was
through
different.
that.
Yeah. And thanks to Cascade Street Distillery. Ben drank all of it. That being said, you guys have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.